All right, welcome back to Fight Talk, where we talk combat sports. A little Canelo Berlanga preview here. I'm Austin Owen, by the way. I will not be joined by Jackson in this video. I'm going to do a little boxing breakdown, and hopefully this can drop Thursday, a couple days before the fight. But we're going to get into a few things here. We're going to go a full breakdown, obviously, of the style, of the odds of the fight. Talk about the situation in which it's fighting against the Sphere, a fascinating situation. Came out today that Oscar De La Hoya is going to go to the Sphere show, which is very interesting, although maybe not, because Oscar's always in for some drama. We're going to talk about their past fights. Obviously, Berlanga went on that 16-fight knockout streak to start his career, and it seemed like he was destined for this fight. But then he had a few duds. So we're going to talk about that. And we're going to obviously talk about the Canelo experience, what makes Canelo so special. Why is a fight against the Sphere something that he could actually outdo the Sphere in? We're going to talk about that. I know me and Jackson are dropping a Sphere preview tomorrow as well, I think Thursday. And so we're going to argue that a little bit, talk about which is bigger. I know what he'll say. I'm not sure yet. I mean, the Sphere should be bigger, theoretically. They've put a lot of money into that. This is just another Canelo fight. But Canelo fights are massive. And Canelo's one of those guys. A lot of boxers these days say, I don't want to go head-to-head with the UFC. Canelo's not afraid to do it. He just went head-to-head with UFC 301, which was in Brazil. And now he's going head-to-head with, what does Dana call it? One of the greatest combat sports event. The greatest combat sports event of all time, I think, is what he's called it. Obviously, the card doesn't quite do that justice. But we're going to talk about the Canelo experience. Then we'll talk about the situation at 168 pounds. And then obviously Benavidez and Bivol and Beterbiev and the names up there. Any Canelo fight, you got to talk about that. So let's start off just with some simple things here. Obviously a 12-round fight. Canelo Promotions is putting this on. This will be in Vegas, so Vegas is popping this week. Obviously, the press conference for both of these events will be tomorrow, which I'm really looking forward to. I think the pay-per-view is at $90 is what I've heard, so that's interesting. A little more expensive, and this is in an era where, by the way, we'll talk about this on the pod at some point, but Turkey is talking about $20 pay-per-views. He says the September 21, which is next week. I totally forgot. Could be a $20 one, the Anthony Joshua Daniel Dubois fight card. And he says he wants to make that a real thing. And obviously you've got this thing with the UFC where they're trying to hit a TV deal towards the end of the year here. So a lot of interesting things here as we look at that. But let's get into this fight. Without further ado, this isn't going to be a super long preview. Just a couple names I want to highlight right off the bat. Stephen Fulton, if that sounds familiar, it's because the one in the loss column is to Inoue. That has been Inoue's, what is said to be his toughest test to this date, and he passed it with flying colors. Obviously, you've got Rolly Romero making his return after the loss to Isaac Cruz. So it seemed like Romero was going to fight Garcia. Romero instead fought Cruz. Bad decision. Sounded like he had immediate CTE in the interview after the fight. And then something that a lot of people are forgetting, I think, on this card with all the Sphere drama and everything going on. Caleb Plant's fighting on this card. A guy that had a great fight against Canelo, and now he's fighting on the undercard here. That's a great fight. That is a fantastic fight. Caleb Plant is a lot of fun and has a lot of options in the future. He's one of those guys that's really going to benefit from being on some really good cards in the future now that boxing is in a good spot where those cards are happening. Danny Garcia for the WBA World Middleweight title. And Lara. And then Saul Canelo Alvarez. 61-2-2 against Edgar Berlanga, who is still undefeated, but lost a lot of the aura that he had with that 16 fight first round knockout streak. I remember the night it ended, I was at a bowling alley with my friends. I don't know if this would have been my junior year or sophomore year of high school. I was at a bowling alley, and I was expecting him to get another one, and obviously he didn't. Still won by decision. But we're going to get into all of that. Let's talk Canelo experience first. My favorite is Dallas, Texas. And it was at AT&T Stadium. It was his last stadium show that he did. And it was against Billy Joe Saunders. And you had the Mexican trumpet players playing as he walked in. It was an electric entrance. But we've seen this. In fact, the one in his last fight was actually really good. In which he faced Jaime Munguia. That was a fantastic entrance. But this guy he perfectly encapsulates what is Mexican boxing. And it's interesting, you're fighting head-to-head with the Sphere, where Dana White says, okay, we're going to put on the greatest. I mean, this is a love letter to the Mexican fans. He just said it on First Take, I think it was 2 days ago. And none of the good Mexican fighters, I mean, besides Rosas Jr., none of the good Mexican fighters are actually on the card, which is really interesting. If you're doing a love letter to the Mexicans, you would typically put your top 2 Mexican fighters that you have on it, and he didn't. But the great Mexican fighters, Canelo Alvarez, who was it? A couple years ago, John Ryder was the fight in the stadium in Mexico. Just fantastic. I mean, this guy just puts on scenes, absolute scenes. He knows how to enter the ring. He has fantastic songs picked out, and it's an atmosphere. And it was interesting in the last fight with Munguia. These are 2 fighters from different parts of Mexico, and so you had this weird contrast, and a lot of people thought, okay, what's going to happen here? I mean, or what are we going to see here? Is this, is Munguia actually going to get 60% of the fans or 65%? And the answer was obviously no. It ended up being Canelo. But we saw Canelo tested that night. But there's something special about the Canelo Alvarez experience. And there would have to be, because we now have Tank Davis, and Anthony Joshua, and Alexander Usyk, and Bud Crawford, and Inoue, and all these stars that are in their primes getting knockouts, and yet Canelo Alvarez, the guy with 2 losses and 2 draws, by the way, still gets mentioned as the face of boxing, and is probably unanimously called the face of boxing. Isn't that incredible? Bud Crawford is knocking everybody out. So's Tank Davis. So's, all these guys. Usyk's a great story at heavyweight, and it's still Canelo Alvarez. And that shows what he means to this sport. It's absolutely incredible. Let's talk the Sphere quick. I think it's going to be interesting. They shouldn't have done it, for one, right? Like, they shouldn't have done it. There's no reason that you have to go head-to-head with the Sphere. Obviously, it's the Mexican Independence Day thing. But the UFC was very vocal for a long time that they were going to do this. But since obviously they're in the Sphere, it still opened up T-Mobile for Canelo to fight, which he always likes to fight. He likes to fight twice a year now. Mexican Independence Day and Cinco de Mayo. Or that weekend. And so, yeah, this has allowed the opportunity for Canelo to still fight, since the UFC chose this to be their great Sphere show. And so Canelo's team said, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to go head-to-head. And it was really fascinating. And a lot of times it hasn't become a story. I remember June 29th last year when the Bud Spence fight was on the same night as 291 with Gaethje and Poirier. And personally, I was like, that's frustrating. It was a great combat sports night. It ended really well. You had 2 great knockouts. But it's frustrating as a fan. You never want to have to... I mean, it's fun to have the 2 TVs set up and go through that experience, but you'd rather have it... I mean, then you watch the next weekend and you see some Apex card in a no-name boxing event, and you're like, well, it would have actually been nicer if we had just done it 1 week apart. But that never gets any headlines. I mean, people like me feel that, and the everyday combat sports fan feels that at home, but it never actually makes headlines. This was different. This made headlines. Everything with Canelo makes headlines, but this made headlines, and there's a little bit of button heads between Canelo's team and Dana and the UFC, and we know how Dana feels about all of that stuff, and so he really believes that this is not going to have any effect on his show. But again, as a fan, it's a little frustrating. You obviously wish we could work together a little bit. I'm going to a Nebraska football game Saturday night. I don't know what after that is going to look like. I don't know if I'll be able to have 2 screens to watch. And so it might be a replay that I watch Canelo. I'm certainly watching the Sphere first. Little frustrating, but hopefully the unifier, Turkey, Al-Shi, can get that figured out in the near future, and we don't have to worry about that. But I just wanted to, there's a lot of ways we can talk about this, of what's going to be bigger. At the end of the day, I think tickets never lie, and so let's look at the tickets a little bit. This is the Canelo fight, and so this is right on the T-Mobile Arena's website. And so as you look around, these are the very top seats, and your cheapest ones are going to be about $400. And then your cheapest in the lower level is going to be about $5.50. Once you get on the better side, your cheapest one will be just over 1,000. And you're seeing how many seats here are open. Not very many. This is a sellout. There's no doubt that these tickets will be bought and full, and this is going to be a solid event. So that's really good ticket prices when you're competing with the quote-unquote greatest combat sports event of all time, the Sphere. Speaking of the Sphere, there's the ticket prices for the Sphere have made a lot of headlines. You've probably seen that. This is just so fascinating. Look at this map, by the way. But the tickets have gone down. I think the cheapest right away was $2,000, and I think it's down to $500. I'm seeing here the cheapest, and obviously this is, there's going to be other websites where you can probably get it for cheaper, and I haven't looked at those websites, but your cheapest on here is going to be about $700 and some. And there's your 2,000s. And so if I just click in here, I'm not sure if it shows. Okay, it does. That's a little more worrisome. For the UFC, I'm guessing they did not expect to see that map. Let's see how that matches up. I wonder if that works if I... it's not going to work on this website. Oh, maybe it will. No. So that's a little worrisome. Not that it matters. The gate, I think, is doing just fine. But something to think about. So that's Canelo versus the Sphere. Let's talk a little past fights here. So as I go to Canelo's, obviously Berlanga, the most recent fight, just beat Jaime Munguia. Cinco de Mayo weekend. That was a fantastic fight. It was a unanimous decision. But obviously we're seeing right here a lot of UDs. The UD against Charlo was a good fight. The Ryder one was bad. That was a bad UD. John Ryder was not good. In fact, John Ryder within the last couple of months has actually retired from the sport. So that was not good. Triple G, the UD, lost to Bivol. Obviously. And then Caleb Plant was the last knockout. That was in the 11th round. Obviously some more knockouts down here. So that's what you're looking at with Canelo right now in his last fights. How has Canelo looked recently? He's looked slower. The head movement's just as good, I would say. That's not really a worry. But he's definitely looked slower. He's definitely struggled. He's gotten hit more. Now, this is a guy who's never been knocked down. That's a big deal. But he's definitely gotten hit more. Munguia probably got more of him than than many guys before. I mean, obviously he's lost twice, but he's never been knocked down. Munguia got him pretty good. He got him pretty good. Charlo never got him. But he's way slower. Technically, still totally there. The jabs look fine. The hooks look fine. Everything there looks fine. But there's big worries. Not about the chin. He's got a great chin, but about whether he's seeing shots as well and whether he's reacting as fast. And he's not. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. It's quite obvious. And so he's winning in different ways, and he's still really good. Certainly not at the top of people's lists for entertainment fighting anymore. But this is a guy who is totally still getting it done. And we'll get into predictions later, but I think gets it done again here. Berlanga's the interesting one. I just don't think Berlanga poses the threat that Munguia did. Berlanga, great power, but pretty orthodox. He's not as unorthodox as a puncher. I mean, Munguia's like the Patrick Mahomes, and Berlanga is like the Peyton Manning. I mean, Peyton Manning's always going to throw from the same stance, from the same arm angle, whereas Munguia throws from way different angles. He gets hit and he fights back. Berlanga, he's not going to switch stances. It's always going to be the right hand that he gets the knockout with. You know what you're getting. He's not going to throw off his back foot or throw underhanded like Mahomes, right? It's just, you know what you're going to get. You can't be a one-trick pony and beat Canelo Alvarez. That's just the fact of the matter. But when we look at this, obviously you see all the knockouts. So we see all the knockouts here to start his career. Just incredible, by the way. And then 2021 is his first unanimous decision. And then he goes UD again, UD again, UD again, UD again. And then a knockout in his last fight. And now Canelo. So a lot of unanimous decisions there after a lot of knockouts. And against guys that I've never heard of and you've probably never heard of. So that's pretty worrisome because he's not going to win. It's got to be by knockout here on Saturday night. He's not going to win by rounds. Not a chance. Unless maybe hurts him like bad early and just somehow picks him apart. Even if you hurt him bad, I think Canelo would win by rounds. There's no path to victory by rounds here for Berlanga. So that's what we're looking at with Berlanga in his past fights, which can kind of bring us in to a full breakdown here. And that's what we're going to do. First, we'll break it down first. So let's go into the main event and really get into this thing. Topology is the best, by the way. But here we go. A little tail of the tape. You see the records. You see the last 5 fights. Bivol was the last loss for Canelo. Berlanga's never lost. Minus 1450 on here for betting odds for Canelo. Obviously, Canelo's the champ from Mexico, from Guadalajara. He's 34 years old now to Berlanga's 27. And then Canelo's 5'8" to Berlanga's 6'1". Not an issue at all for Canelo. 3-inch reach advantage for Berlanga. So this is going to be your picks here. Man, the ads are brutal on some of these sites, by the way. Canelo 97%. And that's what that's looking like. So I'm interested to see how Berlanga comes out of the gate. Because Munguia, because of the style he fights with, he had the ability to come out pretty hot and get after it early. Berlanga can't do that. Berlanga's more, I know he had all the first round knockouts. He's more of a time knockout guy in a fight like this. He's just not going to come out and do it right away. He's got to stand behind the jab and then catch him with a big right when he's least expecting it. It's just, I don't see it happening at all. Canelo has such fantastic head movement. He's never been knocked down. Not knocked out, knocked down. He's never been knocked down to the canvas. And he still has a lot of power in his punches. And Berlanga's gotten hit in the last fights. People see the UDs and think he has no power behind the punches anymore. Watch the Munguia fight back. Munguia's a tough son of a gun. A lot of guys would have actually been knocked out by Canelo in that fight. Canelo was, these were clean shots, clean hooks and uppercuts, big shots. He was still landing massively. And so I think he gets it done by knockout. I do. He looked faster in his last fight against Munguia, not on defense. But he's eaten a lot of shots, and I have no reason to believe that Berlanga's power is any different than all the shots he's eaten in his last fights, if that makes sense. I have no reason to believe that. It looked for a little bit like his power was going to be different, but it's quite clear now that it's not. Just took a step up in competition, and it's not there. And so I'm going to take Canelo Alvarez by 9th round technical knockout. That's my official prediction. Canelo Alvarez by 9th round technical knockout. I think he knocks him down maybe in the 5th and then gets the finish in the 9th. So that is my prediction. Berlanga is not the chosen one, as it says by his name right there. This is another Canelo show, and I think he gets the finish here, and I think it's going to be amazing. I think he has a little bit of, I think maybe the UFC got under his skin a little bit, and he really wants to put on a show here, and show that this is a real love letter to the Mexican fans, not the Sphere card. But man, I'm excited for this fight. I'd be much more excited if it wasn't head-to-head with the Sphere. But I think Canelo gets it done by knockout. Berlanga does not come out hot early. He knows he can't win that way. So Canelo wins round after round. He catches him with a hook in the 5th, knocks him down, and in the 9th, he gets him against the ropes, gets a technical knockout. You heard it here first. Here are your betting odds. This is on Action. Minus 2,000 for Canelo Alvarez and plus 950 for Edgar Berlanga. The over-under is at 8.5 rounds. I said 9th round, so right around there. Main card starts at 7, and the walkouts will be around 10 o'clock, probably closer to 10:30 or 10:45. So that is your full breakdown. And before I leave, I want to go through a few things here with the situation at 68. Fascinating. After the last David Benavidez fight, which was the Tank Frank Martin co-main, Jackson and I did a podcast. That was our first podcast that we did together. And we spent a good long while talking about the situation here at 138, and it's an interesting one. You've got Canelo, super middleweight. And let me know if you see any names here that can beat Canelo, because I don't. He's going to destroy Berlanga. He beat Munguia. There's nothing there. But it sounds like he wants to stay there for now. Beat Callum Smith already. So as we go up, we see David Morrell, which is interesting. David Morrell just won on that Terrence Crawford card in L.A. And you've got Benavidez. Okay. So 175. So here's the situation. Benavidez just moved to 175. He just won by unanimous decision on June 15 on that co-main on the Tank undercard. He did not look great. He didn't look great. He was a little slower. Didn't punch the same. Didn't have the same power with his punches. Didn't pack it. He looked like the same fighter. He just looked underpowered at 175. It's a big jump, and he wasn't ready for it. He says he wants to either fight there or fight Canelo. He keeps calling Canelo out. I still don't know who I'd take in the Canelo Benavidez. I'm not going to get into that now. But that's interesting. And then obviously Bivol and Better BF. So they'll fight on October 12th against each other. Shakur Stevenson hurt his hand today, by the way. He backed out of the co-main there. Really unfortunate. And so before October 12th, I'll do a full breakdown on this YouTube channel and talk about that fight, which is fascinating. Oh, my goodness. Like, technically, the fight of the year. Like, when you talk about technical boxing, and by the way, don't believe that means they're not going to knock each other out. Better BF can knock anybody out. So, but technically, these guys are at the top. So I cannot wait for that fight. But the winner of that fight, Bivol already beat Canelo. I still think Canelo could take Bivol, but Bivol's really good. And then Better BF, who's getting older, which might interest Canelo. If Better BF beats Bivol, which I'm not going to make a pick on that yet, I'll wait till later, but if that would be an interesting fight for Canelo. I don't think he would take Bivol again. They've already had more than enough opportunities to try and make that fight, and Canelo doesn't want to. And then obviously Benavidez, which is probably the most fascinating fight. And so the big question now with Canelo is, does he have to take these fights? We've compared it on this podcast to John Jones. Does John Jones have to fight Tom Aspinall? He's fought all of the baddest guys. He's towards the end of his career. Can he take a few Stipe Miocic fights? And the answer to most combat sports fans is obviously no. We want to see you continue to fight the best to prove it. I fall in between. I really do. I mean, I want to see Aspinall Jones. I want to see Canelo Benavidez. But they've put their time in. And Canelo, more than anything, he's a fighter. He's tough. And more than anything, he's really smart. And deep down, he knows whether he was in the ring with Bivol. He knows whether he can beat Bivol again. He knows whether he can beat Benavidez. And, he'll tell you that he's going to beat him, but, deep down, the guy knows. And if he's not taking the fight, that should probably tell you that he has a pretty good idea that he could lose it, maybe viciously, and he doesn't want that stain on his career. And that I would respect. He'll never say it, and that's okay because he's a fighter. And he doesn't have to. He's a fighter. He stepped in the ring 66 more times than I have, right? So I'm not here to criticize that. But now if you're John Jones and you're saying I'm the best in the world and Dana's saying you're the best in the world, then you should fight the guy. But in this situation, I understand. So that's your full background. 9th round technical knockout. I will probably be back on here, I believe, after the fight on Saturday. I think Sunday maybe I'll drop a full breakdown and upload that here on the YouTube channel. On the podcast, we're going to be dropping the Sphere preview and then post-show, obviously. Expect that on Sunday. But yeah, I'm excited to continue to dive into the boxing on this channel specifically. The sweet science, man. It's so beautiful. I'm open to any suggestions of what that might look like on this channel, whether that be breakdowns like this or breakdowns of individual fighters. I did a full tank breakdown. It was like an hour and 20 minutes, and YouTube just copyrighted the crap out of me on that. So that's not going to drop. Maybe on Spotify it'll drop at some point, but that's not going to drop on here. But I'm looking into a few things that maybe we can do with the boxing on here, because boxing's a great sport. And if we didn't have the UFC, we would still have this podcast because boxing's great. But with that, I can't wait for this. It's going to be a great combat sports weekend. And I will see you next time. For now, I am Austin Ullman, and Canelo Alvarez is going to win in the 9th round.